the John Mendelssohn Radio Minute. I suppose it's human nature to think that the world begins and ends with you. But history suggests that isn't the case. Just as there were folks walking around 6,000 years before you and I were born, it's likely that there will still be folks walking around doing the things folks have done since time immemorial, long after you and I are gone and completely forgotten, except not in my case, because both my music and my humor are immortal. It's interesting to speculate about how those who are around in 2051, let's say, are going to remember the late 20th century. My guess is that in a 2051 history book, we'd be likely, if science can somehow keep us alive that long, and President Trump doesn't blow the world up to show other countries that the USA isn't kidding around, to find entries like these. For many years, the most venerated American screen star was a woman with the unlikely name Meryl Streep, as in strep throat. She mastered pretty much every accent anyone threw at her, and starred in such iconic films as Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane, and Alien, in which she, as the title character, slithered out of the belly of her co-star Angelina Jolie, who was famous for adopting over 300 orphans of different races, colors, and creeds, and being married for a while to Brad Pitt, namesake of the so-called pit stop, a favorite maneuver of NASCAR drivers. Ms. Streep's career ended when she ridiculed America's greatest president for ridiculing persons suffering from something called arthrogryposis, as though it was President Trump's fault. Mr. Pitt, of course, was a member of the so-called Rat Pack, led by the attractively gray-haired George Ku Klux Klan, a Southern fraternal organization whose members wore 100% polyester costumes that often caught fire at cross burnings and weenie roasts. And let's not forget the 20th century's number one entertainment phenomenon, the Beatles, from Lilliput, as described in Jonathan Swift's bestseller Gulliver's Travels. Or was it Taylor Swift? Anyway, the Beatles comprised John, Paul, Elvis, and ringworm, a skin infection that causes a scaly, crusted rash that may appear as round, red patches on the skin. It was treated with antifungal medications. They sang in shrill falsettos to be heard over the screams of their largely female pubescent audiences, and broke up acrimoniously after Elvis announced his intention to make a series of inconceivably awful movies, no few of them with Meryl Streep. One of the Beatles briefly collaborated with the blind harmonica virtuoso Stevie Wonderful on a series of public service announcements having to do with not sexting while driving. Finally, how about this? Humanity was nearly extinguished in 2018 when Donald J. Trump, president of what was then known, a little pretentiously and not very accurately, as the United States of America, heard one too many cruel wisecracks about his comically small hands and used one of them to launch a nuclear attack on Mexico, though he assumed some Mexicans were good people. So far, so good, but then Mexico's allies China and Pakistan retaliated, and the whole of humanity was blown to kingdom come, except for a small group of evangelicals in Piety, Tennessee, and the employees of a Samsung sweatshop in a little town in China whose name I won't even try to pronounce.